I tell you what I did this morning. I got up and I live here with my mom. She's beautifully, wonderfully 86 years young. And I did something Joy I hadn't done in a long time. I fixed her breakfast.
Awesome.
Yeah, I fixed her breakfast as she was getting phone calls all morning from my brother and other family members and friends from around town, around the country. But it was great. And it's wonderful to still have your mother at this point in in your life. But today, as it is about the mothers, and I want to thank all of you that are joining in for being here with me and Joey. And one thing I wanted to bring to bear right from the jump is something that has touched all of us in this country, and that is the horrible, violent death of Ahmaud Arbery that happened down in Brunswick, Georgia, Glenn County, here just recently. Well, actually, the shooting took place back in late February, but justice is really just not being sought. And I want to thank the GBI and, quite frankly, the governor of the state of Georgia as well, too, Joy, who got involved in this. And within 36 hours, arrests were made and should have been made based on, I think, what we clearly all saw. But I really want to offer my condolences to his mother on Mother's Day, and her son also had a birthday, his 26th birthday on yesterday, and I'm so sad for his loss that on this Mother's Day he's not able to be here with his mother, and our prayers go out to the family. But I think it's important, maybe Joey, I'm gonna ship it over to you to kind of talk a little bit for us to talk a little bit about these violent shootings that have taken place and so many mothers who will not have their sons and daughters with them today. And we need to acknowledge that for them.
Yeah, we really do. Wonderful to be here always to share some space with you, a conversation with you, Dr. Cedric Alexander, who has done so much for so many in the area of law enforcement, in the area of government, in the area of just, impacting people's lives. So thank you for all you do. Before getting into the details and the specifics of, which is a very sad story, let me just give a shout out to all the mothers out there. You said, Cedric, you got up, made this wonderful meal for your mom. Amen. You know what? 86 years young. I got up, made a wonderful meal for my wife. I can't take full credit though, because she kind of assisted, right? I'm not too much of a cooker, right? So I can make some eggs, and that was pretty good, I think.
Yeah.
Doesn't take much to throw a little bit of, meat on the grill or something. You know what I'm saying? So it wasn't really much, but it was what I could do. Of course, I sent a shout out to my mother, my sister, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, all of you I send a shout out to. And of course, the celebration continues there hereafter. And so just remembering and thinking about all the mothers, and we all recognize and understand that we would not be here but for you. And not only would we not be here, we would not be guided as well as we are. Children, who grow up to be young adults and young men and young women would not be who they are without you. So thank you, moms. We appreciate you so
Yes, we do very much.
no doubt. So on the issue at hand, sadly, Mother's Day helps us reflect on some things. And what it helps us reflect upon is all of the things that mothers do. And as mothers do all the things that they do, it certainly helps us to understand that oftentimes mothers, it pains me to say this, lose children. And in losing the children, it's just so painful, Dr. A, when they lose them under circumstances like we just saw there in Georgia. It's really tragic. It's sad. It's preventable. It's avoidable. And it should never happen, but it does. And so, certainly our condolences, our hearts, our thoughts, our prayers, our minds, our spirits, our love goes out to all the mothers, and particularly a mother in that circumstance that endured just a horrific tragedy. So stay strong. Easier said than done. Stay in faith. Easier said than done. But just know that so many people love you, support you, are lifting you up in prayer, have your back, and will hopefully get you through this very difficult time. And with that said, Dr. I'll throw it back to you. I do want to stay on this case, though, to discuss some facts that I think are very pertinent, and some facts that I think some people have to be aware of, because this was, it didn't have to happen and was certainly preventable.
Yeah, and over the last number of years, Joey, going all the way back to Michael Brown, 2014, which I was very much involved in during that time, and that's where we kind of first met uh, there at CNN, and we had a lot of opportunities to debate a lot of issues, particularly around officer-involved shootings and shootings that were of question. And for someone like myself, who spent a number of years as a police chief and a public safety director there in the state of Georgia, it certainly did have a lot of mixed and conflicted emotions that I certainly had to deal with and experience, and at the same time do my job. But I tell you, when you have such a tragic loss as what we saw in that video by two civilians who just took it upon themselves to be what appeared to be just vigilante and to act out that type of violence in which they did because they thought that he may have been a burglar. But there's no evidence to support that. And even if it was evidence to support it, it was not their place to intervene or interact. We don't even train police officers today to go and intervene in acts when they're off duty. What we ask them to do is observe and to call for backup and to do what any common citizen would do. That's how we train police officers today when they're off duty, unless there's some real imminent danger involved. And there was no imminent danger involved here with Mr. Arbery. This is a horrific case of just sheer violence that probably was predicated clearly by race and hate. And there's no other way to define it. But my biggest issue with this case and the mother who lost her son, who cannot on Mother's Day be with her son and have to be in this sad place that I'm quite sure we all quite sure know that she is. But it's the DA's office there that failed to shirk this responsibility and not take the evidence that was in front of them and make a case of probable cause. If the GBI can come in 2.5 months, 3 months later and make a case in 36 hours, it is very evident to me this could have been done earlier. So my hearts and prayers here again go out to Miss Arbery and her family. Joey?
Without question. And just to pick up on what you say, when, the doctor, when he says GBI, he's talking about the Georgia Bureau of Investigations. And I just want to say something, we know that there's been 3 district attorneys in the case, right? The latest one, of course, that's when the arrest was effected, when the Georgia Bureau of Investigations came along. The first DA took a pass as a result of a conflict of interest having to do with, of course, we know one of them. We're talking about Greg McMichael. We're also talking about Travis McMichael. Greg McMichael, 64 years old, apparently a former police officer. In addition to that, was an investigator in the district attorney's office until he retired. The first DA, district attorney, decided to take a pass in light of that. The second district attorney who had the case, there was a potential conflict in light of the fact that his son had worked with the elder, that is Greg McMichael, and so he decided to keep the case. Kudos to the mother here, of course, of Arbery, because the mother said, hey, look, this seems a bit too close. It seems you should get off the case. And that's the only basis that he got off it. The issue that I have, Dr. A, is that one day after this occurred, the former DA who got off the case had rendered a conclusion. Yes, you heard me. A day later, that there was nothing to see here. In any circumstance, I think something, is certainly justified to have an investigation, right? At least look into it, speak to other witnesses, collect the information, before you make a conclusion that there's nothing to see here. And then even though he recuses himself, Dr. A, he therefore, even in recusing himself, renders an opinion basically saying that the citizen's arrest was perfectly legal, the use of force here was perfectly legal. And I don't want to get in the weeds, but I just want to briefly explain. In order to make a citizen's arrest, something that is a crime has to happen in your presence. That's number one. Or you have to have immediate knowledge of a crime. That's number two. There's conflicting reports about whether or not he was coming in or out of, apparently there was a home under construction and he went in and then he left it. At best, that's a trespass, which is a misdemeanor. Why does that matter? Because if you're running away and say he was running away, right, and he wasn't simply jogging, and the naysayers say, well, he was running away. You have to have committed a felony in order for a citizen's arrest to be operative. So that would still be an issue. So getting out of the weeds, let's look to the use of force. There are three things that are important in order to justify use of force. One is that you're in immediate fear of your life. The guy's running away, he's jogging, presenting no issue to anyone. I don't see how those trying to affect the citizen's arrest, Travis and Gregory McMichael, weren't any immediate fear of their life. Number two, the force you use has to be proportionate to the threat posed. What threat was he posing, right? And number three, you have to act reasonably. And I think the question of whether they act reasonably, I mean, in my mind, it's not even a close question. Let me just finalize by saying this. There may be those who say, but look at the video. If you look at the video, Arbery was attacking him at the time. There's something called the initial aggressor doctrine. That is, if you're the guy who ultimately gets the gun, gets into a truck, rolls behind somebody, hunts them down, stops them, detains them, points a gun at them, or has a gun, at their direction that's brandished, and that person fights back, guess what? They're not the initial aggressor. You are. And so having put yourself in that predicament, you cannot take advantage of the law's protections by saying, I was protecting myself. So any way that you slice this, it looks bad, it is bad. And I'll just conclude by saying this, Dr. A, that, again, this didn't have to happen. It did. It's sad. It's tragic. And when you look at it happening, it should not happen at all. And I know, and I would just like to salute and pray for at this time, not only, of course, Mr. Arbery's mom, but the mothers of so many others. And I think we have them, with regard to people and unfortunately young African Americans who have lost their lives, in instances which are so dire, so tragic, and just, should not occur. So, I know that we have a number of the mothers that we could show. And I just say hearts out to all of you who have lost your children as a result of senseless violence, whether it be by law enforcement or someone else.
Yeah, and certainly how painful it must be for these mothers on this Mother's Day. And we're going to continue to pray for them and their families.
Absolutely.
Because it certainly is heartfelt. And I think we all feel a sense of fear and regret and disappointment and anger and any other adjective that you can think of, because these type of events just seem to occur way too often, and it is of major concern for all of us. But you giving us that insightful legal insight in that, to Joey, I think is helpful to all of us. So thank you very much, my friend, for that. And hopefully you and I won't have to debate any of these anytime soon. So
I don't think we will. But and in concluding this, and again, I do want to pay homage to the mothers, and if we have those, I would like, if our producers have them to show the various mothers, who have lost, and those who maybe it wasn't a famous case, but maybe, it doesn't have to be a famous case. Any child that's lost to gun violence, whether law enforcement is something else, it just saddens the heart. And Doc, I'll just say that, even in our discussions, whether it's when, me being in Atlanta and speaking to you there in our various appearances that we made on the network, or, in New York, when you came to New York, we spoke about so many other things, but I could recall that something that troubled you greatly and me greatly. And you said famously, you know what, it's just going to keep happening. And sadly, it has. And it's just so unfortunate. And so again,
So let's move on to the next topic here. Again, in tribute to our mothers today, I think it's so important too that we pay real homage and tribute to the mothers that are out there. They're on the front line every day. And that's those mothers who are working across our healthcare facilities, hospitals, nursing homes across the country.
Yeah.
I mean, many of them are not at home today with their families, celebrating this Mother's Day, because they're caring for others in such a critical time. And they're putting so much of themselves and their lives at risk. And we just can never say enough about those mothers that are out there during this COVID-19 pandemic that we have going on, and the spirits that they keep up, and those that they have to keep encouraged while trying to keep each other encouraged, and still being able to feel like they can go home and safely be with their families. And enough can never be said about them. And the women out there who are on the front line as firefighters and police officers who are still fighting the battles every day, having to come in contact with people. And as we see some crimes across the country going up, such as homicide, domestic violence, child abuse, they having to intervene and doing the very best that they can under the circumstances in which we all have to work in. And my hats are off to those women who do such a tremendous job out there as our public safety officials and our healthcare providers in these hundreds and thousands of hospitals and senior citizen facilities across this country. Where would we be today, Joey, without their help and their support during this pandemic? It would be far worse if we did not have them. So that's my thought about it, Joey. And
Yeah, I completely agree. Let me say this on that issue. Uh, so my mom's a nurse, retired. My sister is currently a nurse. And obviously, you worry, right? I remember going with my mom when she was a visiting nurse and treating various people at various locations. And what an experience that was for me as a young person, right? I remember when I was 11, 12 years old, I used to go with her. My sister now, speaks to me about all the various things that she's facing. And, CNN did a fabulous special along those lines, honoring those on the front lines. My sister was involved in a special with two other nurses, Nurse Dawn and Nurse Michael, and they talked about their experiences on the front lines. And it was interesting because what they were talking about is you're in a situation where they, in effect, become part and parcel of the family of the people who are suffering, who are there. And the reason I say that, the reason that they were speaking about that issue is because, remember, because of this COVID, families were barred from coming into hospitals because of what it could mean to them, what it could represent. They could be harmed, they could be injured, there could be some other way. When I say injured, obviously by the disease, I mean sickened by the disease in a significant way. So they were barred from being there. The nurses started using FaceTime to connect the families, to the person who is having the COVID ailment, to, of course, their families, their mothers and their daughters and everyone else. And it became quite an emotional experience for them. And so we salute the frontline workers. We salute the frontline mothers who have been lost as a result of this. We salute the frontline, mothers who have not only, as I mentioned, those who have been lost, but those, of course, who have children who might have suffered from this, who have other relationships who might have suffered from this. So, we're there with you. We understand the great work that you do while you're on the front lines, and we're just so thankful for all you do. And so, I know Dr. A joins me in saying, without you, the world would be a different place. So continue to stay on the front lines, continue to do all that you do, and continue to endear us to you, and just gain all of our admiration and respect for a job well done.
and Joy, too, we're not the end of this pandemic. And even though we're seeing businesses reopen across the country in some type of scheduled way, uh, we just have to remember this. As the country reopens, and if there is an uptick uh, in these COVID cases, we have to remember that it is going to be these mothers, those mothers, these women uh, who are going to be there, and we depend so much on them. And this Mother's Day for me goes so far beyond us just acknowledging our own personal mothers, which we love and appreciate, but just acknowledging all the women that are out there who are mothers and those who are not mothers, who are just doing a tremendous job and doing it selflessly and not being selfish, but being very altruistic in their actions and doing things and taking risks that many of us would ask ourselves, uh, would I be willing to take the risks that they do, to do the things that they do, to be able to go out on the street as a police officer and be able to engage people who very well may uh, be infected, and to always constantly being on guard, and our women and our mothers who are in hospitals and nursing homes and work in a variety of different places, uh, who are not home with their families today. If one thing bothers me at this very moment, it are those that are there taking care of those who can't take care of themselves, and they're not with their families today. And they're out there and they're fighting a war, they're fighting a battle, and which we cannot see. But my heart goes out to them, and I think about them and I pray for them. And this is a very special Mother's Day this year, and prayerfully next Mother's Day next year, we won't have to go through and see the suffering that we are seeing uh, uh, from these, and these frontline mothers don't have to contend with what they're contending with now. I just can't find enough words to praise them for the great work that they're doing, and all the mothers and even women that don't have children, uh, but they got a mother somewhere,
Mhm.
and uh, we salute them sincerely, deeply.
Very well stated, Dr. A. I join in that, as we say in court, I join in that application. So important that we do so. And I just want to transition as our last topic. We know there's a Mother's Day special. We're keeping it tight, just a half an hour, not as a way of interrupting you mothers out there who, of course, are getting all the love, praise, and admiration that you so well deserve, but as a way of adding some value and saluting you on this very day. We just want to give a special have a little short segment on the elderly mothers. And it's, Dr. A and I thought it was important to speak about the elderly mothers out there. You heard how he opened up the show. He opened it up by what he did in with regard to his own mom, his mother being 86 years young, and him making breakfast for her and being able to, just enjoy her company and to treat her like the queen that she is. And I think that's so insightful, and it's such a wonderful thing to be able to do. I say it's so wonderful to have your mom, at 86. My mother, thank God, she's alive and well. Not quite 86 yet, but I lost my dad when he was 67. But that's for Father's Day. But certainly he's with me every day. So we know you elderly mothers, you do all that you can do. You mothers, you know who we're talking about. You're the grandmothers out there. You're the great grandmothers out there. And whether you're a mother, a grandmother, or a great grandmother, you're still great. All right. You may not have the great designation, but you're still great. And particularly during this time around COVID, we salute you because we know that you are more prone and susceptible, of course, to contracting and acquiring this awful disease. And so we have to protect you even more than we do on any other day. But certainly we give thanks. I had the good pleasure as I grew up to, have great relationships with my grandparents, great relationship with my grandmother. My great grandmother, bless her, she died when she was 96 years old, and she used to tease me all the time. I remember the year before she died, literally the year before she died, I took her to a baseball game, and
Mhm.
she was just, wonderful, and she was just following along the game, and she used to always tell me something. It was interesting, and it lasts to this day. She told me two things. Every time I saw her, Dr. A, without fail, she would say, "Study your lesson, child. Study your lesson. Study your lesson, child. Study your lesson." She used to tell me that when I saw her, and she always used to say another thing: "You're gonna make it, child. You're gonna make it. Study your lesson, child. You're gonna make it." And that's my great grandmother. We used to call her Mama.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, we called my grandmother Mother, and we call my mother now Mother Dear. So to all the to all the elderly ones out there,
Yeah.
we love you.
Yeah. And where would we be without our mothers, our grandmothers, our stepmother, step grandparent mother, without a foster mother, without an aunt, without someone who played that role in all of our lives. And whether we had a mother that was there with us when we grew up, or whether one may have been absent beyond any control that anyone could have, uh, it's so important for us to remember that I think all of us, whether male or female, we all have a certain blessing of being able to mothering those our own children to be the very best that we can be. And I certainly can look back over the years of my life, and I remember first becoming a police officer. That was probably the last thing my mother thought that I was going to be. And when I mentioned it to her as a young 20-year-old, her support was beyond what I could have ever imagined. And I saw that over the course of the next 40 years of my career and of my life. And but I also remember being that kid too, Joey, growing up in my era where I also got my butt beat a lot of times too by my mother. And I don't want to talk too loud because she'll come out here and she'll jump on the show and she'll start telling all y'all things I need to do. So I'm gonna try to keep it down. But it's so important for us during this time of COVID-19 as our businesses and our countries begin to open back up. Remember, we all have to remember when we go back out, we have to use the same precautions that we have always used. Because if you are in and around or live with or have contact with those mothers and fathers, men and women, who are certainly of maturity and age, and up in age, is so important for us to be mindful of the fact we have to protect them, because for many of them, their immune systems are very much compromised. And it would be great for us to keep that in mind. And if my mother was uh, feeling a little better than what she's resting now, after I gave her that big breakfast joy this morning, she would come out and say the same thing to all the mothers out there, and that is Happy Mother's Day to all of you, and stay safe.
Look at that. Look
Okay.
at that pic.
Okay.
Look at that pic.
Yeah. Yeah, how about that?
That's your sister. That's not your mother. That's your sister.
Nah, that's my mother. She'd love to hear that from you, Joey.
Yeah.
Oh, that's my mother. And for those who don't have mothers that are with you this day, uh, take it from me and Joey, and from the bottom of my hearts, your mother is somewhere feeling you and watching over you, and it's so important that you remember that. And because when we have them, we have them, but when they're gone, they're gone.
They're gone. Indeed.
And
Uh,
And let me say one other thing. One of just popped up. Anna Felice had also reminded me to mention to everyone here, which is so important, that you have mothers out that are still carrying on their jobs and coming home, having to homeschool as well too. Again, we tip our hats to the tremendous work that you are doing.
Very well stated, Dr. A. So again, we appreciate you joining us during this Mother's Day special. We send out all the mothers. There you go. That's my family right there.
Family there. How about that?
That's my mom, my mother-in-law, my wife. Hon, honey, I'm calling her. I'm calling her in, seeing if I could convince her to do a little. What do they call that? A cameo. Come here, do a little cameo. The little cameo show. So we appreciate all of you guys. It's a great thing. It's good to be with Dr. A. This is my better half, obviously, right? I don't have to say better half. It's obvious, right? But it's all good. So thanks for joining. Have a fantastic day, everybody. And you do a great job, hon. Great job. She's a wonderful mother and good peoples. And we salute this mother, all mothers. We love you guys.
We love you guys. Take care. We'll see you next time.
All right. All right. See you guys.
Bye.